Thank you all for coming and welcome. I am Emma, one of your hosts this evening. I am an ecologist, a scientist. I worked for over 15 years in wildlife conservation before I realised it's not enough. And so for the last 4 years, I've been protection with Extinction Rebellion. I spent 2 months in prison recently as part of the Insulate Britain campaign, and now support civil resistance through the Just Stop Oil Coalition. Just like you watching tonight, my journey, if I know that's a funny term, but started with hearing people telling the truth, like you are going to hear tonight, and then making the right choice, the only choice to act in this emergency. So I'll be one of your hosts tonight, along with Liam. And over to you, Liam.
Cheers, Emma. Yeah, my name's Liam Norton. I got involved with Extinction Rebellion through their blockade of the 5 bridges back in 2018. Spent my life on building sites. I described myself as like politically aware but not active, and discovering about the catastrophic reality of the climate crisis in the early days of Extinction Rebellion has just propelled me to take part in civil resistance, and seeing the effectiveness of it through my time in Extinction Rebellion, Insulate Britain, and now with the Just Stop Oil Coalition. So yeah, it's a brief introduction to me, and it's really lovely to be here with you all tonight.
Thanks, Liam. And a final welcome to everybody on this call and watching live on YouTube, or if you're watching it recorded, a call about our country's greatest ever national emergency.
As you all know, it's been a long time coming, and it finally arrived, didn't it? A week or so ago, we had 40 degrees Celsius here in the UK, and this call is a response to that situation and to find out what we can do about it. So who would have believed it? And we're here because it's the same all over the world. The catastrophes keep getting worse, and they keep getting worse every year. More and more of them keep happening. And it's going to go on for a long time yet. It really could not get any worse, could it? But it will. The situation globally is going to be described by our speakers, so I don't need to go into it in detail, as the list would just take too long to go through. But there is a documentary on the BBC at the moment called Big Oil versus the World, and in it lawyers from the state of Pennsylvania were taking the oil companies to court because they say oil companies have been involved in a 40-year fraud and deception to hide what they knew to be true, which was that increasing levels of CO2 and other greenhouse gases would be harmful to the vast majority of the world's inhabitants. Fraud usually involves stealing money, but this fraud is slightly different, isn't it? As it will steal the lives of billions of people if drastic action is not taken immediately. But the oil companies don't get to run their business without the facilitation of national governments, which therefore makes our government complicit in one of the greatest crimes that will ever have been committed. And this is one of the reasons that we are completely justified in engaging in peaceful, non-violent civil resistance at this point in history. We are completely justified. What will 1.5 degrees mean? How many will die? What if we miss 1.5? What will 2 degrees mean? How many will suffer? Well, that depends partly on what you decide to do during this call today. We have an unimaginable amount of power if we act collectively, and we are proposing that that is exactly what we do in October later on this year. The situation is bad, and yes, we need to create change and hope for a miracle or even two. But we've seen miracles happen before in history, and we could see them again. But what we have to do is our part of the bargain, which is to resist this criminality with every fibre of our being. There isn't any more time to mess about. So this call is about action. And after we've heard from the speakers, our job here is to get into small groups, share how we feel about this complete, total head fuck situation, and then sign up with everyone else to do the only thing that we can do in 2022, and that's civil resistance. And there'll be a list of options for you to choose from. I've said on previous calls like this, if you're not going to stay for the breakout rooms after the calls, then please ask yourself what it is that you are doing here. Your space could be left for somebody who registered but couldn't get in, but does actually want to do something and take action. The point is this isn't another one of those nice, polite climate science things where you get a few vague euphemisms about the end of the world and then pop off the call without doing anything. Let's be clear about one big thing. Those days have well and truly gone. Well and truly gone. This isn't an educational call. This is designed for people to fulfill their responsibility at this time in history and do their bit for the world, for their country, for their community, and for those that they love. This is it. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you. Apologies. Didn't have the technology to unmute myself. Yeah. So, as you know, the Just Stop Oil Coalition has organised this call. Just Stop Oil is the biggest climate campaign in the country. Thousands of people are getting arrested. More than 50 people have already been put in prison for acting on the obscene injustice we are presented with. A government that totally refuses to stop drilling more oil and gas. I know, like words fail me in this emergency, as our government are failing us. So this evening, we have some of the most powerful voices of our time to speak. Jeremy Corbyn, Bill McGuire, Chantelle Lunt, Lee Jasper, Chris Packham, Kerry Abel, and Zoe Cohen. Esteemed, inspirational voices who refuse to stay silent on the biggest crisis humanity has ever faced. Thank you all so much for being here. Our guest job tonight is to tell you the blunt, no-nonsense truth, and they will. Our job is to act in a way that forces this genocidal government to cut carbon emissions now. It is no longer complicated. Really, I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. This is our choice. It's resistance or death. It's that simple. So just another gentle reminder, we're going to be holding breakout rooms after the speakers. And if you don't want to engage, we ask you to please leave and watch it live on YouTube, and that will allow us space for other people to join instead. So thank you. Following this call, each region of the UK will be having follow-up Zoom meetings in the next week, where we can get down to the work of mobilising for the biggest coordinated use of civil disobedience tactics in our history. This is historical. You are part of this, and you are on the right side of history by doing so. Thousands of people will be non-violently blockading Westminster from Saturday, the 1st of October, until the government cancels new oil and gas. We will block day after day, week after week, for as long as it takes. It's all starting with a march and a demo, plus lots of other stuff going on Saturday, the 1st of October. There's going to be lots of leafleting, door knocking, social media stuff. There is so much to do. We need donations. We need people to support, mobilise. And when we go into breakout rooms, you will all have the chance to commit to doing your bit. This is it. This is now. No longer time to be a bystander. The time is now. So we are going to give people 4 options that you can do on this call. So briefly, option 1, donate. Give what you earn in an hour as a once-a-month donation to help the hundreds of people who need support as they mobilise people up and down the country. We've raised £500,000 already, but we need more people to support us to raise another 1 million. You could help us raise what we need. Option 1, donate and financial support. Option 2, direct support. Get involved in the activities of our coalition partners, of which there are many, and those which we support, which are growing and growing around the country. They need you and we need them. You will be given links to all of these. For example, People's Assembly, Peace and Justice Project, Fuel Poverty Action, XR Trade Unionists, Animal Rebellion, Stop the War Coalition. These are just a few of our coalition partners. We're going to share information on ongoing and upcoming strikes and how you can support them. It's vitally important. How to join a trade union, how to take action on the cost of living crisis, how to not pay your energy bill from the 1st of October. So many ways you can support us. You can help us organise local and regional actions and events, especially if you have connections across various groups and movements. Support. You can help us do that. Number 3, mobilise. We need to mobilise people for the big march and the start of mass continued civil disobedience at Westminster, the centre of power, the centre of failure, Westminster, 1st of October. We need to canvass, we need to leaflet, we need social media. Each week from now until October, let's talk to people, let's door knock, let's mobilise like our lives depended on it, because they do. Trade union movements, faith communities, BIPOC community, professions, your friends, family, neighbours, colleagues, you could help mobilise these people. And finally, number 4, act. Let's be honest with ourselves. Nothing is going to change until thousands of people engage in civil disobedience. We will peacefully blockade Westminster every single day from the 1st of October, day after day, week after week, until we get a government response to the coalition demand for no new oil licensing for oil and gas. We've got around 1,000 sign-ups already. We're well on our way. You are not alone. This is going to be the biggest civil disobedience campaign in UK history. More and more groups are joining. The coalition is growing. How's it going to work? It's going to work on a shift system. Each region of the UK holding the blockade 1 day a week. They can't arrest all of us. Judges will be making it clear to the government that they have to respond. So we are asking you, can you commit to just 2 days? Come down to London, go to a non-violence training and sit in the road. It's that simple. And if you're on the fence about it, now is the time to get off and act. We all have privilege, we all have a duty, and we all have a responsibility in this crisis. We can no longer be bystanders. The time is now. Okay, you've heard enough from me. That's the 4 options: donate, support, mobilise, act. You can do one of these, you can do 2 of these, maybe you can do all of them. So if you still need convincing, let's move on to hear from our first speaker, Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy is a British politician who served as leader of the opposition and leader of the Labour Party from 2015 to 2020. On the political left of the Labour Party, Jeremy describes himself as a socialist. He has been an MP for Islington North since 1983 and currently sits in the House of Commons as an independent. Welcome, Jeremy, and thank you so much for being here. Over to you.
Thanks, Emma, and thanks, Liam, for your introduction and what you've just said. And what you've said is brilliant and inspirational. And Liam, you remind me of the late, great Harry Mundy of Australia, who was a building worker who did so much to try and change the nature of the building industry and the development strategies in Australia. And he's somebody that I think we should venerate as a great pioneer of environmental campaigning. Tonight's call is positive. Tonight's call is about what we can do. Tonight's call is about what we can achieve together and how we can bring people with us in doing this. And it comes on the day when BP have announced record profits. Shell have announced record profits. Pretty well every energy company has announced record profits, including Centrica. At the same time as people's energy bills are going up, and so that there is before our very eyes, a vision of the greed of what big business is about and the way in which they will continue damaging the environment. At the same time, they're now saying, well, we need to guarantee gas supplies for the future rather than preserving what we've got, rather than using less and all the rest, all the other environmental things that are on offer. Instead, they're proposing to go back to fracking. Fracking is dangerous, is pollutive of aquifers and watercourses, and was quite clear from the fracking that was done in Lancashire, it does set off local, if not larger, earth tremors. There is no solution in fracking. We have to say absolutely no to fracking, alongside saying no to any new oil developments in the North Sea or indeed anywhere else. It has to be weaning ourselves off oil. And if anyone wants to work out how we got to this situation, I advise them to read the book Crude Britannia, which shows the influence of the oil industry on British economic thinking and the way which destroyed so many more environmentally sustainable alternatives because of the political pressure it was able to put forward. And so our view is, my view, that the energy companies should be in public ownership, that they should be accountable to the public for what they do, and that would enable them to develop far more sustainable and renewable sources of energy rather than fossil fuels, which is what they're doing at the present time. But the environment is also about what we do to our natural world and what we do to ourselves. The water industry poured sewage 400,000 times last year into English rivers. English rivers are the most polluted around and getting worse. And that, again, comes from massive profits by the water companies, a lack of investment, a lack of repairs to the pipework, and a whole system that's predicated on waste and pollution rather than sustainability and protection. Again, public ownership of water seems to me an absolutely fundamental thing. The public ownership should be there and our industry accountable to the people that benefit from it, as well as those that suffer from the pollution they create. But it's also about the legal right of the natural world and the environment, because planning decisions are generally speaking made on the basis of accessibility, transport, etc., etc. They're not made on the basis of the natural world and the effect on it. So the legal status of the natural world is something that we have to work hard on promoting, and also promoting of greater biodiversity, not just protection of what we got, but greater biodiversity. And I've been spending the last few months going around all the primary schools in my constituency, talking to students in year 5 and 6 mostly about their perceptions of the environment. Now, most of these young people have no access to their own open space at all. They live in flats with no gardens, in some cases with no balconies at all. So the school playground, the school development is very important to them. But I tell you what, they get it on biodiversity. They get it on protecting natural world and insect life. They get it on sustainable agriculture. If they can get it, so can everybody else. I was proud to put forward a manifesto in 2019 that put forward the idea of a green industrial revolution. The green industrial revolution was to bring forward investment in sustainable industries, in clean green technology, use technology to protect the natural world and the environment, but not make enemies of those people that are working in industries that are going to have to change. Instead, invest to protect those jobs while those industries convert. We're not here to declare war on people who work in polluting industries. We're here to stop the pollution of those industries and bring those people with us. COP26 was at one level a great exercise in greenwash in the centre of Glasgow, but another way it was actually very interesting, the way in which campaigners from all over the world walked together with the Glasgow refuse workers to support their strike and support their demand for better reuse and recycling facilities in Glasgow. But this is also a global political issue. It's a political issue in Britain to stop our government starting new oil or gas works, but it's also a political issue all around the world about the use of natural resources, about the destruction of natural world and rainforests in Brazil, in the West Africa, in South Asia, but it's also about how we live our lives. And one of the slogans put on the stage that we had at Webster's Theatre in Glasgow, where we were doing an alternative to COP, was you cannot stop climate change without system change. That means you have to challenge the idea of an economy based on the endless exploitation of natural resources and the endless profiteering of particular companies. It is about public good and caring for everybody within our society. This is a seminal time in our history. The world has now got the highest temperatures ever in most countries and most continents of the world. It's got the worst levels of pollution and the fastest ever destruction of both animal species as well as plant species, as well as our natural world. Unless we stop doing that, unless we do something different, then it's going to be destroyed. No question about that. And so what impresses me is the number of people that have come together in the peace movement, in the environmental movement, in activists all over the world who are thinking, in broadly speaking, the same direction. This week in New York, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference is going on. There is a huge environmental impact on that as well. All these issues must be brought together. And so we need to get a large number of people there on October the 1st. And I just say on October the 8th, the Free Julian Assange campaign is organising a big demonstration. His releasing of information around the world of what happened to people is part and parcel of the same campaign. So I urge people to also support his campaign on October the 8th. I will certainly be doing that myself. Today, come together, inspirational, activist, and above all, optimistic, so that we can harness genius of the young people all over the world who want to live in a cleaner, greener, safer world, not a world of war and profiteering. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Yes, come together, absolutely. It's inspirational and it's so absolutely necessary. And now we're going to move on to Bill McGuire. Bill is an academic, an activist, broadcaster, blogger, and writer of popular science and speculative fiction. Bill is also a patron of Scientists for Global Responsibility and a co-director of the New Weather Institute. His latest book is called Hothouse Earth, an Inhabitant's Guide. Welcome, Bill, and thank you.
Thank you very much. As Emma said, I'm Professor Emeritus of Geophysical and Climate Hazards at UCL. Some of you may know my new book, Hothouse Earth, an Inhabitant's Guide, which came out a few days ago. I must admit it's a bit of a grim read, but all that's in there really does need to be said. If you do want a copy, then bookshop.org is the best place to go, I've been told. I want to say a little bit today about where we are now in terms of climate breakdown and global heating and where we're going. It's not a pretty picture, and I really need to start by saying that we have to face the fact that efforts to keep below the 1.5 degree global average temperature rise, which is regarded as a dangerous climate change guardrail, are pretty much dead in the water. If we were to do this, we would need to reduce global emissions by something like 45% by 2030. And in the real world, this really, barring miracles, is not going to happen. And in fact, the trend is upwards. We're likely to see emissions by 2030 14% up. And in fact, it may be even worse than that with the Ukraine war and all the energy issues associated with it. So the brutal truth then is that it's now practically impossible to sidestep dangerous climate breakdown, which will affect everyone and insidiously will insinuate itself into every aspect of our lives. And it's critical we recognize this, because it means that while we have to slash emissions desperately quickly, we will now also inevitably have to adapt to the new conditions of a much hotter planet. I think probably the greatest concern at the moment is the speed with which global heating is translating into extreme weather. And we should remember that this is happening for just over a 1 degree C global average temperature rise. And it was really telling that a mocked up Met Office weather forecast for 2050 was the spitting image of the actual weather map for July the 19th this year, when of course UK temperatures exceeded 40 degrees centigrade for the first time. And this happened almost 30 years ahead of when the Met Office expected. And I think that says it all about how quickly things are proceeding. Now, there isn't going to be any respite, certainly in the near future. Next year looks likely to be an El Nino year where the Pacific Ocean begins to get hotter. This has a knock-on effect on global temperatures. And so we could see 2023 being the hottest year on record. So that's where we are now. Where are we going exactly? Well, it's a good question. On the basis of current policies, we're on track to see the global average temperature climb about 2.7 degrees C above pre-industrial times by the end of the century. That's well over double what we've seen already, getting up to 3 times what we've seen already. If what are called national determined contributions, which are effectively national promises or targets, if those are stuck to, which is highly unlikely in any case, that figure could be brought down to 2.4 degrees C, which is still well over the dangerous climate change limit. And these national contributions haven't been updated after COP26 by almost every country. So things are not looking brilliant in that particular area. The reality is, if we factor in feedback effects, if we factor in tipping points, then we're likely to see 3 degrees, 4 degrees, or even more global average temperature rise by the end of the century. And this is going to happen quickly because 1.5 degrees C, the dangerous climate breakdown guardrail, is likely to be exceeded within 10 years, 2 degrees almost certainly before 2050. And of course, 2050 is when the UK government and many other governments around the world are seeking to have net zero emissions. So the fact is, by the time we get to net zero emissions, we will already most likely be above a 2 degrees C global average temperature rise. And even when emissions are way down, even when they're way down to zero, that doesn't mean that the global average temperature will start to come down. It will stay elevated at its highest level for many decades, perhaps centuries to come. So whatever climate change has happened up till then will be locked in for a very long time. And of course, tipping points that have crossed will continue to be tipped. So if the Greenland ice sheet has started to collapse irreversibly, then that will continue even when we get to net zero. If sea level is rising rapidly, that will continue to happen. And in fact, sea level rise in any case is going to go on for centuries after emissions, when and if emissions are brought down. On sea level itself, it's rather disturbing that the rate of acceleration has increased dramatically in recent decades. Sea level is now going up by about a centimetre every 2 years, and there's a worrying sign that this is doubling every 20 years or so. So in that case, we could easily see 2 meters or more of global sea level rise by the end of the century. If there's anyone out there in Boston or Spalding in Lincolnshire watching, that's something you really need to be aware of, because the North Sea will be coming way inland in that part of the UK. And it's sobering, actually, when I'm on sea level, to look back at the last interglacial. It's a period called the Eemian, and it's a time when temperatures were round about what they are now, but sea levels were 6 to 9 meters higher than they are currently. So that's the direction in which we're pretty much inevitably heading. Now, in terms of the impact of climate breakdown in the decades ahead, I just want to mention one statistic that's worth looking at, and that is that by 2050, the world will require half as much food again, but crop yields will be down by as much as 30%. Now, that's clearly a recipe for widespread famine, for war, and for civil strife. And there's no way that the UK is going to be immune from that. It's absolutely clear then that climate breakdown presents the greatest threat to our society and our economy. And it's highly likely, either of these are highly likely to survive in their current form. And even worse than that, the human race faces an existential threat. Worst case scenarios about how bad climate breakdown is going to be have been dangerously neglected. And there are now calls for the IPCC, for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, to start looking at these worst case scenarios, because they may well be not that unlikely at all. And the greatest worry is that we'll see a cascading effect of feedbacks that will lead to the planet flipping, its climate flipping into a hothouse state, an irreversible hothouse or greenhouse state, which will involve a doubling of planetary temperatures. Now, at the moment, our planet on average is about 15 degrees C. That could double to 30 degrees C or even more in the worst case. And the bottom line is clearly that our civilization, and quite possibly humanity itself, would simply not be able to survive those conditions. I apologize for being so depressing, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. Don't apologise at all. Thank you for being here. Some brutal truths there from Bill, but also talking about tipping points. And what we have to remember is there are also social tipping points. And right here on this call tonight could be the start of one of those. Don't lose hope. When hope fades, action begins. And that's why we're all here tonight. And without further ado, we will go to our next speaker, Chantelle Lunt. Chantelle is an educator, writer, presenter, and activist. She's director of Little Green Juice Box and Merseyside Alliance for Racial Equality, as well as being the founder of Merseyside Black Lives Matter Alliance. Thank you so much for being here, Chantelle. Welcome and thank you.
Hi, thanks for having me, and I hope I'm coming over loud and clear. Apologies if my internet does cut out. I'm in Scotland, having spent a bit of time with the climate camp in Aberdeen, and they took an incredible action over the weekend. They did a sit-in at an oil harbour in Aberdeen against obviously new oil and these blinking new oil developments that are happening. But in the past week, I've done a lot of decolonial work around climate justice, and I'm aware there'll be a lot of people who are kind of like, why, you know, decolonial work and climate justice, what's that all about? In short, I can't cover it in 7 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a few words that I've written down, and then I'm going to cover a few points. And I know my brother Lee Jasper's on here, so I'm hoping that he's going to cover a few more when he speaks. But if you do want to know more, just check out Merseyside BLM Alliance and Merseyside Alliance for Racial Equality. But here's a few words I wrote down. It's called Pass the Mic. The Guardian came first, warden of the land, taking only what was needed, leaving behind not a trace nor footprint, but a whisper in the ears of the youngers. We are here for a moment in time. Permitted by Gaia, the goddess supreme, she allows us to drink from her streams. Her conditions should be understood. To roam this earth, you must do good. Tend to the animals, replant the trees. Gaia has given us all that we need. But if our mother suspects any greed, from her wrath there will be no reprieve. Guard the land so all creatures can breathe. Then came the colonizer, Bible in one hand, gun in the other. The generous colonizer relinquished the chains, attacking brains with a heart and minds campaign, bringing glad tidings, a mission of morality, sailing away on a wave of grim reality. They held his Bible, but he had their land. Now we have the corporate monster, a slick devil, spawn of slavers and colonizers. His scaled tail propels him into the middle of the ocean. Diving down, he sinks his sharp teeth into Gaia's exhaust of fresh, sapping away her life source, drop by drop. Her roars shake the surface as her fever continues to climb. Unrepentant, the corporate monster swims landward. Matt is heard ensnaring marine life in his wake. On shore, he burps petroleum over parched forests, smiling in delight as it catches light. The corporate monster straightens his tie and slithers to the village. No need for weapons. His silver tongue whispers in the ear of the farmer. Feeding your family and village is not enough. You need more. The farmer plants the best for the West with no pests. The corporate monster grins as the last coin clangs, teetering atop his overburdened bucket hands. The crocodile grin widens at the next village he sees. His pesticides are working well. A turban farmer has fell. Pushing aside the body, the corporate monster admires his crop. He brings the widow good news. She can work off her husband's debt, printing "There is no planet B" on his new polyester slogan tee. The saviour carries the fate of the world on their shoulders, determined to right their ancestors' wrong, holding a shield above the sea and sun, white cape billowing as they step into the fray, determined to find another way, so that Gaia might permit us to stay. Show her that we can leave no trace, a recognition that we are here but for her grace. Loud hailers amplify the voice of the Saviour, drawing others near, carrying a message all must hear. Beaded wrists rise in the crowd. No megaphones, the ancestors taught them to be loud. Closed fists as the message is delivered. Eyes darted as each word cut with 1,000 quivers. You stand here and say no more. Now the destruction is at your door. It has been on our lands for generations and more, brought here by the West, always assuring us they know best. Indigenous forests burned as native lessons went unlearned. Our children choke, yet our voices are overspoke. Standing here telling us how it is, knowing not our ancestors' whispers when we were kids, yet still we stand in allegiance on the front line while you position us near the cameras holding your sign. The sins of the father will not be forgotten. This war won't be won if you place us at the bottom. That pyramid must fall. Shoulder to shoulder, we all stand tall. Now pass the mic. And when we talk about passing the mic, it's about a recognition that capitalism is a natural conclusion of colonialism, which was the conclusion of slavery, which revolves around the exploitation of Black and brown people, their land, all of the wealth that that land generates. And there's not enough time for me to go into it, but most of the wealth in arable land and freshwater supplies are in the global south. And this has been in the global south a lot longer than it's been here, but because it was that problem over there, a lot of people didn't want to address it. And now that our temperatures are shooting up, people are like, hang on a minute, what's going on? And it's something that people like, you know, like a lot of people on this call, like myself, have been talking about for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, years and years and years. We've been saying this message. And it's important that at this moment, we do not disregard voices of colour. We do not tell them to stand to the side, because climate justice is racial justice. This is directly linked to a racialized hierarchy. And even in this country, Black and brown children are 30% more likely to be breathing toxic air levels. The first person to have pollution listed on their death certificate was a 9-year-old Black child, Ella Kissy Adu Deborah. And so it's important that we do stand shoulder to shoulder. It's important that organisations like BLM, civil rights activists such as myself and Lee Jasper are incorporated in this movement. But not only within this movement, we need to ensure that climate justice movements are expansive global movements. We can't just look at the UK, because everything that is happening in the UK is happening in the global south. And what you are seeing is the fortifying of our borders to stop the repercussions of what the West is doing in the south from coming here. So the reason we are stopping a lot of migrants from coming here is because the reason that they are migrating is because of the damage that we are causing through leaving waste on their lands, technological waste, fabric waste, our own actual household waste on their lands, through treating the global south as a dumping site, through waging wars in the global south that result in ridiculous levels of pollution, through rising sea levels caused by the West. We offshore our migrants to Rwanda, yet in Rwanda, it takes them a year to release the same CO2 emissions that it takes us to release in 5 days. We're stealing life from the global south. So any climate justice movement must be inclusive of all voices, and we must all stand together. And it's important to recognise eco-fascism too. This is something I've been speaking about recently, and I know I've got 2 minutes left, so I'll make the point really quickly. Any movement that talks about overpopulation in the African continent or in brown-skinned places as being the problem and the reason for this climate emergency is not a movement that we want to stand in support with. Overpopulation isn't where it's at. Conservation efforts that remove indigenous people from their lands is not where it's at. Where it's at is standing together and dismantling capitalism at the same time that we are fighting for this planet, because this planet cannot survive under a capitalist system that wants more and more and more. The beautiful thing, I will conclude, about this climate justice camp that I was at this weekend was it kind of showed you, it was like 3 days of seeing a world of what we want it to be. Everyone was pitching in, everyone was making food, everyone was doing things on the land that weren't going to leave a mark. And we all stood together in this gorgeous little solidarity where everyone was equal. Didn't matter, you know, what you looked like, didn't matter what your accent was like. And we were all fighting for the planet. And it was kind of gorgeous. And that's what I hope this movement can be, a movement where we all stand together, everyone's equal, and we're all fighting to save our planet. Because the way I see it, this is the end game. There's nowhere we go from here. If we don't take action today, our children don't have a future. And we'll be telling them in 20 years why we lost. So now is the moment, and now is the time to act. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much, Chantelle. Yeah, powerful words, and a reminder that climate justice is racial justice, is social justice. And something that stuck out for me there is that in the poem, the words you were reading, is that we are here for a moment in time. And this is the moment, everyone hearing this now, everyone on this call, this is the moment in time. And about standing shoulder to shoulder and everyone equal. This is the end game. So thank you so much for sharing that, Chantelle. And I would now like to invite Lee Jasper to share his thoughts with us. Lee is a British politician and activist. He served as senior policy advisor on equalities to the then Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone. He is a relations activist and works with a number of community grassroots organisations. Welcome, Lee, and thank you. Thank you for being here. Over to you.
Thank you. And what a delight it is to be here. Look, I'm going to cut straight to the quick. You know, we're facing this existential crisis. There's no time for prevarication. There's no time for indecision. There's no time for thinking, you know what, I'll put it off and maybe think about it later. Time for action is right now. And it can never be a more fundamental time or a wake-up call than the current environment bonfire that we see happening right around the world. With people in the global south facing the most horrendous climate change and emergency crisis. And let me tell you, you know, following on from my dear sister Chantelle, you know, when climate change crisis happens in our countries, it's the poor African, Caribbean, Asian and ethnic minority communities resident here who are forced to increase their remittances to cope with a climate change emergency that is a consequence, has its roots in colonialism, plantation, and resource extraction that was necessary for colonialism, fed into the Industrial Revolution, saw the global North rise in prosperity at the expense of global South. And in doing so, he's now having polluted the world. We now see the most egregious and vicious effects of climate change impacting upon the most vulnerable in the world. That's why Chantelle is right. This has to be a global movement. And that means platforming and amplifying those voices from the global south in this coalition. This coalition now has to be one of the most exciting moments, I think, in my political lifetime, because it offers the potentiality to break out our individual silos. Whether I'm campaigning for race equality, well, race equality is central to climate justice. Climate justice is central to social justice. If we're going to, if we want to decolonize the climate movement, then we have to think about decolonizing the global economy in a way that others have spoken about to give us a more just and equitable world. Growth in the global south is inevitable. What has to happen is for the West to grasp the fundamental fact that you have to reduce your consumptive level ability. Now, that doesn't mean worse living conditions for people in the global north. It need not mean that at all. because if we properly tax and control these global monopolies that are reaping billions of pounds on the profit of global misery and climate change, then we can redistribute those incomes and have a flatter, fairer economy in those areas. But it does require the fundamental grasp that the West cannot keep growing. It cannot be based on consumerist growth, because that lies the path that has already brought us to this current position. So it's very important. And I think that people right around the world, if you look at the impact of the cost of living crisis internationally, then you'll see people rising up in Latin America, all over the world. People are crying out for a fairer, just, and equal world. And this gives us an opportunity here in the global north to make the kind of alliances, frankly, those of us on the left would probably only have dreamt were possible. But it does give us that potential. And when you look at the fundamental change brought by the climate change movement, Just Stop Oil here, a Black Lives Matter movement globally, the biggest anti-racist Black-led demonstration since the abolition of apartheid, and going back before that, the civil rights struggle, then you can see that the global potential of humanity to change the world is definitely within our grasp. What it requires is bold, ethical, committed leadership. And going back to the principle of non-violent civil disobedience is exactly where we need to be, not just on the issue of climate change, but on the issue of civil rights and justice. And that's why Blaksox, the social movement I'm involved in, and a whole range of other national Black networks and organizations I'm talking to are warming to the idea of joining this great coalition, because they can see that this existential crisis brought about by consumerist capitalism that has raped the world, despoiled the environment, is something that has to end. And that can only end, not by the influence or the inference of governments, but from a global rising up of people, rising up to save each other and humanity. But the climate justice movement here has to decolonialize itself. Far too often, it's a savior complex in some areas, or institutionalized systemic racism is not well understood. But we're so committed to the coalition that we believe we can work together to bring greater understanding of all of these issues. So I'm delighted to be here today. I want you to sign up. I want you to join. I want you to get into the working groups. I want you to follow. I'm going to be working hard to bring Black activists, to bring Black trade unionists, to bring the Black faith community, everybody I can influence and muster to bring them to this table. Such is the import of the crisis that faces, such is the necessity to build this massive, broad-based coalition that brings together all of those affected by the cost of living crisis, makes the links between climate change and global poverty, seeks a new dispensation on global economics for a fairer, juster world, accepts the goal and the responsibility of lower consumerist growth in the West in order that leveling up can take place on a global scale with developing countries who still need to develop these economies. Monumental challenges, I know, but I have ultimate optimism in the ability of people to come together in a unified way to change the world. In fact, small groups of people coming together to change the world is probably one of the greatest motors of history. I feel, I sense, I know, and I believe we're at that moment in history now. Every generation faces its defining moment when it seeks to fulfill its destiny in order to leave the world in a better place than it was inherited from their parents and ancestors. And today, that responsibility falls on us. So sign up, donate, mobilize, join this coalition, think globally, act locally, and let's make this October an October revolution that the world will not forget easy.
Wow. Thank you so much, Lee. That was incredibly empowering. I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of us. And you're right, there is no time for indecision. The time for action is right now. And we do face monumental challenges, but absolutely echo what you're saying. Small groups of people coming together to change the world. This is the defining moment right now. And if you look in the chat, just to remind you, there are the ways that you can support and help. You can donate. We need those donations to really make this happen. You can support, you can mobilize, and most importantly, you can act. So thank you so much, Lee, for reiterating that. Now I would like to move on and introduce Chris Packham to speak to us. Chris is an English naturalist, nature photographer, television presenter and author, best known for his television work, including The Really Wild Show from 1986 to 1995. He has also presented the BBC nature series SpringWatch, including AutumnWatch and WinterWatch since 2009. He's also an animal rights and climate activist. It's incredible to have you here, Chris. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone for inviting me along this evening. I'd like to use the very first part of my 7 minutes to extend a sincere note of gratitude, thanks and admiration for all of those people currently campaigning at what I call the front line. I'm talking about those people who are ensconced in tunnels, up trees, or gluing themselves to paintings. People like myself do what we can, but at this point in time, not many of us are at the forefront of this campaign. And I just want all of those participants to recognise how we admire their bravery, their commitment, and how valuable their task is. So thank you very much to those people. I need a motivation to do anything. That includes being here tonight. I have to ask myself what motivates me to want to participate. I'll tell you, I'm disenfranchised, I'm disgruntled. Frankly, I'm pretty desperate. I'm certainly scared about the future of life on our planet. And equally, I'm very, very angry. I was a very angry young man. I'm now a very angry old man. The difference between the young and the old is that I've recognized that I need to channel my anger into something creative. Screaming and shouting is not going to solve a problem. Using your imagination, your skills and ability might just. So why am I currently angry? Well, last week wasn't a great week, was it? On the Faroe Islands, 250 miles from the coast of Scotland, 100 or more bottlenose dolphins were senselessly slaughtered by the Faroese. Despite our campaigning following the extermination of 1,400 white-sided dolphins last year and a debate being held in Parliament, nothing has changed. And these people, the richest island nation in the world, dependent on their fishing industry, which the UK is a keen supporter of, still supplying fish, I would highlight to Russia as well, went out and killed more than 100 dolphins. Now, I know that you know that those animals are sentient, long-lived, sociable. They come complete with a language, a vocabulary. They even have names for one another. So I have a great deal of concern that is indicative of the fact that we are not treating the world's wildlife with sufficient respect. But again, here we are, pointing overseas, blaming someone else, the Faroese, for slaughtering their dolphins. What's happening in our own backyard? Well, it's worse. I was on Sunday morning due to rise really early, a drive down to Somerset to show my support for a camp by the Queen Camel Oak, a 400 to 600-year-old oak tree, which was in the path of a slip road to a public school and slated for destruction. And very sadly, on Saturday, the bailiffs came in under the auspices of the government. They cleared the camp. And even whilst the protesters were being taken from the tree, they were cutting its boughs off. And by Sunday morning, the tree was in pieces. And that's an organism which, from my ilk, represents the source, the support mechanism for the richest diversity of terrestrial life in the UK. We know, for instance, that those oaks support more species of plant, insect, and therefore birds, bats, and everything else. So they're highly symbolic. It's a totemic part of our landscape. And we in you know, the UK have only 13% forest cover. We've got the lowest forest cover of any country in Western Europe. And so whilst we, those of us on this call, will frequently call out other nations across the world for their grotesque acts of deforestation, let's not forget that deforestation is continuing afoot here after a history which has reduced our nations to a point where it's the lowest in Western Europe. Did it get any worse? Well, yeah, it did get worse, actually, because DEFRA, the government statutory body, which is meant to be there to safeguard our natural environment as one of its many tasks, decided that they would not publish in 2023 all of the biodiversity indicators. So these are the measured species and habitats which are intensively studied because they represent a very good barometer of our natural health. But DEFRA have said, do you know what? We're going to take a break from giving you the figures. And the reason we suppose that they're going to take that break from giving us the figures is because it's all bad news. And that's, again, what stokes my desperation. I put a ladybird on my finger at some point in 1963 and fell in love with the natural world. And ever since that time, I've sought to better understand that natural world, and then ultimately to better understand it so that I can protect it. Since 1970, we've lost 68% of the world's wildlife. And since 1975, we've lost 90 million birds from the UK. I can't even imagine what 90 million birds look like. I suppose it depends on the size of the bird. I was watching the Lionesses valiantly playing their sport at Wembley the other night, and I imagined, well, how deep would it be? If we got 90 million birds and put them onto the pitch in Wembley, how deep would that be? I can't calculate. And I think that many of us, certainly those involved with the UK's environmental NGOs, have lost touch with what we're doing. We keep trotting out these statistics. We measure the declines and changes in distribution of UK species with greater accuracy than any other nation on Earth due to the highly qualified skills of our naturalists here, both professional and amateur. We know what's happening. We are measuring it, and we have been tinkering around the edges. So yes, we've demonstrated that we have the capacity to regenerate, store, reintroduce. We have a toolkit for recovery. But as everyone on this call knows, we have not been rolling out that toolkit with sufficient urgency and breadth. And as a consequence, we are in a nation which is one of the most nature deprived anywhere on Earth, which is difficult to countenance because we are a nation of animal lovers, apparently, both domestic and wild. And yet on our watch, to my eternal shame, carried as an enormous burden of guilt on my shoulders, is the fact that in my time as an active conservationist, we've lost all of these species. And as Bill has highlighted, and I could do the same, not from a climate perspective, but from a biodiversity perspective, we have passed tipping points for many of these communities, species, and habitats. We are staring down the barrel of their destruction, and it will happen on our watch. So we could just give up, put our binoculars, our microscopes, and our magnifying glasses in the drawer and go and have a party. But I love the natural world. I've loved it since that ladybird took off and spiraled into a blue sky above 10 Cleveland Road in Southampton. And I'm not going to give up. I will fight in what is now becoming rapidly a last stand for the natural world. I'm speaking here at this point from the perspective of someone who is a naturalist. But what we all know, again on this call, is that our health, that health of life on Earth, is intrinsically linked. We are dependent on environmental ecosystems, services Earth, the fish we harvest from the sea, the plants we take from our dying soils. We have to act, if even selfishly and arrogantly for ourselves, in order to preserve that life. I think in order to do that, we need to change some tack. And we've heard about that this evening. The tinkering around the edges is not going to work. This is the time for significant action. They won't fix it. The people that we've elected to govern us at this point in time are not going to solve these problems for us. I went to COP. I came back, I think, probably clinically depressed. I didn't expect much else, but I was horrified by the inadequacy of what was taking place there. We can fix little things ourselves, and self-empowerment to make a difference is a very important motivational tool. So yes, we should all do our little bit. We should recycle. We should cut down on our meat. We should use more public transport. But ultimately, as individuals and even small communities, that is not going to solve the problem. We must force the people that we've currently elected to govern us to make seismic, significant changes of the type that Just Stop Oil are campaigning for, the cessation of the further research and drilling for future fossil fuels in the UK. It's that level that we are now needing to concern ourselves with. That's why we need to motivate people in October. And in order to motivate those people, I think that we've got to, again, continue to think anew. And it is happening. I'm seeing more imagination, more originality, more new ideas in the campaigns that we undertake. But we are fighting a billionaire press and a media that's left us scrabbling for untruths for decade after decade. And to try and break through that and make news and communicate our concerns, to further enlarge our community, we need to communicate with them. And that means not plying the same old tricks time and time again, because frankly, folks, they won't get news, they won't get attention, and they won't get the sympathy and the empathy that they require. When it comes to dealing with the world's wildlife and wildlife within the UK, one thing that we need to think about is what I call entry-level activism. We want to embrace as many different people as possible. I know full well that we could ask all the members of the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds to go and glue themselves to an oil terminal, and only about 6 would turn up. We need to give these people things to do so they grow in confidence. They grow to understand that their participation is fruitful and productive. And I believe that as things become more critical, as temperatures rise, as prices rise, as inequalities can continue to separate and become greater, then more and more of those people will come on board. But we need activism for everyone. We also need to stop division. We need to be thinking about the crucial issues central to our cause, not divide and conquer ourselves. We need to make sure that when we're talking about politics and our political aims, as important as they are, as fundamental as they are to our success, and we on this call all understand that, and we probably share our leanings when it comes to all of those aspects of needing better political action and better deals when it comes to inequality, that we keep the core issues at the forefront and we develop not division but commonality in our community. In order to drive that, we need a transition. Not everyone will just switch overnight. Animal Rebellion are doing brilliant things. They're getting the message out there. This week, pouring milk all over the floor of Harrods, blockading dairy and supermarkets. I see it, you see it, everyone sees it, everyone asks what's it about, the movement grows. There's no question about that. But we've got to make sure that we bring all of those people together with that commonality. And that means that transition. So people will maybe think, well, do you know what? I might try some oat milk this week because they didn't pour that on the floor. But I'm still going to have a cup of tea with some cream in it. Transition requires our tolerance, another key word I think that we need to embrace. And in order for tolerance to function, to bring everyone on our journey, although it needs to be an increasingly rapid journey, we need kindness. Kindness needs to be at the core of the way that we operate. We need to make sure that transition, tolerance, and kindness are very much part and parcel of what we will need to achieve. I look forward to the 1st of October. I look forward to being able to help, assist, participate in more direct actions, peaceful direct actions, which will drive change. But as Bill has outlined, the backdrop and the arena for that change will become increasingly uncomfortable. We need to make sure that we are making a difference. And in order to do that, I think we need a little love. And we need a little love for the natural world, which means not slaughtering dolphins and cutting down trees. And we need a little love for each other too. Thank you very much indeed. I'm afraid I have another meeting, so I can't stay for the breakout rooms, but my absence will hopefully allow someone else to participate. And you have my assurance that as we move into this theatre of desperation, I will be doing everything I can to stand side by side with every one of you tonight to try and bring my small differences to our larger needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for being with us this evening and for sharing your fear and your anger. I feel that. I think everyone on this call tonight feels that too. But it's how we channel that fear, how we channel that anger into action. And there are so many roles, there are so many ways that people can get involved and support. We're asking you to please donate 1 hour's wage every month. Hundreds of people are already doing this, but we need hundreds more. The link is in the chat. We can donate, we can support, we can mobilize, and most importantly, we can act. Thank you so much for being with us, Chris. So now I'm going to move on, and I would like to introduce Kerry Abel to join us and share what she has to say. Kerry has worked in the trade union movement for 20 years and works on the Future of Rail project as an organiser for TSSA to make the case for skilled workers for a well-funded green future of public transport. Welcome, Kerry, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Liam, for inviting me, and thanks to the other speakers. I'm Kerry Abel. I work in the campaigns team at the Transport Union TSSA, and I work on the Future of Rail project. We make the case for well-funded public transport run by skilled workers for the benefit of the economy and the people. And when I first started working on the project in 2018, two trends were facing us. There was an increase in passengers wanting to travel on trains globally and in the UK, and some of our commuter lines were overloaded and leisure travel was trending upwards. But also there was a trend for increased extreme weather incidents that would disrupt our rail network, and last year already did, fatally in Stonehaven. So since then, we've had a pandemic which has affected ridership, but the trends are, particularly for leisure travel, that people are coming back to rail. And despite dire warnings about climate change, every year when I write updates, there's record-breaking heat waves, floods. Glasgow hosted the COP, and there was promises to reduce fossil fuel consumption. But the UK government's using the pandemic as an excuse to run down the railway. They're not ones to waste a good crisis. The government started calling for job cuts to rail almost as soon as the pandemic started. We know we need a commuter railway because it ran all the way through the pandemic, getting key workers into work every day. Before the pandemic, the Department of Transport, the DfT, were reneging on agreements to electrify parts of our railway to get them away from relying on diesel, and they cancelled electrification plans for Hull in 2016 and again in 2021. They're seeking £1.5 billion worth of cuts from our railway in the next 5 years. And in 2015, the government took £700 million out of Transport for London. So London is one of the only major cities in the world that doesn't have a public subsidy. And they're trying to eat into the infrastructure budget, jobs, pensions, and anything else that's not bolted down for more cuts. So that's where we are at the point of breakdown in negotiations and rail strikes, an ongoing rail strike. The rail unions asked for guarantees from all of the train operating companies and Network Rail for a pay rise and for no compulsory redundancies. And although the Department for Transport are saying this dispute should be with the companies, we know they're the ones that hold the purse strings. The next dates for strike action, where the rail unions RMT and TSSA will be on strike, are the 18th and 20th of August, and the drivers union ASLEF are on strike on the 13th of August. So I want to talk about the importance of a just transition, and also why solidarity between the climate campaigns and the trade union movement is imperative. I think the other speakers have spoken about unity and how we move forward together. Cutting public transport doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to the economy. For every £1 spent in rail, £2.50 of income is generated to the wider economy. If rail investment is increased by 50%, the rail sector would contribute to the economy by an additional £5.6 billion a year. And that's more members of staff on the railway and more trains to add to the solution for climate change. We say that rail jobs are green jobs. Transport is the biggest polluting sector in Britain, and nothing has been done in the last few years to reverse this. Instead, the Tory government are making it worse by investing in new roads. In 2020, the government offered generous bailouts to aviation. The airlines took 1.8 billion from the COVID relief scheme, yet when Eurostar asked for guaranteed loans, no actual money, just to guarantee their loans, so that they could protect the routes to France, Belgium and beyond, as well as 1,000 jobs, they got nothing. Clearly, public transport is the answer, investing in new track and trains and ensuring that the investment is effective by taking rail into public ownership. It was Jeremy Corbyn that launched the climate emergency, and a few years on, we need to act like it. We maintain that all rail jobs are green jobs, and we want to see investment not less in our members, so that we can plan, run, build, maintain, and staff stations and railways. Our movements are not as united as they could be, and having straddled the climate campaigning and trade union movement for the last 2 decades, I know some of the reasons why, but I think that we need to find ways to work together and to overcome our differences. The rail strikes have shown us that there's an example of workers standing up for themselves and standing up for working people, making the case eloquently for good pay deals, strong unions, and the face of public transport. It's workers that will keep us moving, public sector members who will make the planning and procurement decisions for our climate. And we have a lot to offer in terms of organisation and tactics. We've got numbers, 7 million people in the UK are in trade unions. And the trade union base is changing. There are more women and we're taking up our space in the union movement, and our members want a world that their children can grow up with. I'm going to finish with a request for you to please have a look at what Future of Rail are doing, and follow us on Twitter at Future of Rail. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kerry, for joining us this evening. And Kerry has demonstrated just how important it is to support each other in this coalition, solidarity and unity with other groups and organisations who are ultimately all fighting towards the same aim. We are all holding our failing government to account, and we need to support and turn up and support each other as much as we can. Support is one of the options that you can do as a result of this call, alongside donating and taking part in mobilisation efforts and also acting. So thank you so much, Kerry, for being with us this evening. And now, last but certainly not least, Zoe Cohen will now conclude our speakers for this evening. Zoe is a management consultant and coach. She has campaigned with Extinction Rebellion, Insulate Britain, and now with the Just Stop Oil Coalition. She is an active spokesperson and is a fundamental part of this coalition's media and messaging team. Thank you so much for being with us, Zoe. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Emma. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
Also, I'm a former NHS worker, and most importantly of all, I'm also a mum. So we've heard the science and we feel the injustice, and now we need action. If we had a government, dare I say this, that cared for and loved the people of this country, they wouldn't be planning 40 new fossil fuel projects. If they actually loved us, from babies in Barnsley to mums in Manchester and pensioners in Plymouth, If they actually loved and cared for the people of this country, they wouldn't be planning 40 new oil and gas projects. When this country, as we've heard tonight, and we know viscerally in our bones, we passed 40 degrees centigrade only last week. And we're in the worst drought of July since records began in 1836. Crops are failing, fruit is cooking on the bushes, and we are highly food insecure in this country. So we say, not in our name will we accept people going cold and hungry in the sixth biggest economy in the world. Not in our name will we collude with a government and a climate policy that treats our brothers and sisters of the global south like they live in areas that can be sacrifice zones. And not in our name will we accept a country or a world in which young people have nothing to live for. So we say no to fear, no to hate, no to arrogance, and no to denial. We have had enough. We, humanity, are capable of so much more. We say yes to love, yes to courage, yes to humility, and yes to truth. History tells us that civil resistance works. After all, we didn't get the vote by voting. From suffragettes to the poll tax, and from the US civil rights movement to present-day farmers in India and many more. This system, we know, is not going to change itself. Ordinary people must come together to peacefully force the politically impossible to become the politically inevitable. We can take inspiration from nature, as I'm sure many of us do. We must be like a murmuration of starlings in the sky, coming together to form a beautiful human flock, an unstoppable, coordinated force of nature, a force of all of our movements coming together. We, the people, must lead. We, the people, must light the way. We are the last generation who can. So I invite everyone listening on Zoom or on live stream to join this beautiful coalition and take action together on the streets of Westminster, peacefully blockading every day from the 1st of October, day after day in civil resistance together, until we get a response from our government that they will meet our demand of no new fossil fuel licenses in the UK. Everyone taking action in this way will be thoroughly prepared with non-violence training and being supported as part of this loving and growing civil resistance community across the country and beyond. There is such joy and love in taking action together in this way. It is an act of love. And I'd like to end by reading a message from Joshua Smith. Some of you may know of Josh. Josh is a 29-year-old bricklayer from Manchester. He is one of two young people, he and Louis, both supporters of Just Stop Oil, both dear friends, who have been imprisoned without trial, remanded for many weeks, potentially months, all for peaceful actions against a government that has no democratic mandate to be driving us to societal collapse. So these are Josh's words. I have recently replaced hope with faith. I can honestly say that I believe that against all odds, we are going to completely transform the world. To pull this off, we need each of you to dig deep and to find the courage that is required to step into civil resistance against this destructive system. For the eyes of all future generations will look back and judge us for what we did and what we did not do in this crucial moment in history. Ask yourself, when you look back in a decade from now, will you honestly be able to say that you tried everything you possibly could? Thank you, Josh, and thank you to everyone here.
Thank you, Zoe. And thank you so much to all of our amazing speakers. We really appreciate everything that you said, that you've inspired us to feel, and to also, really importantly, give us that kick into action that we need. So as I said at the start, everyone after this is going to go into breakout rooms. So if you're here and you're not going to engage in the breakout rooms, if you could leave in the next 30 seconds, and then we can leave space for people that are watching the live stream on YouTube, the ability to join. anyone that is watching on YouTube that would like to join a breakout, the registration link is about to be put on the comments, so you'll be able to join from there. And if you are watching on YouTube but you don't want to join the call, but you do want to sign up, there's a Google form again that's about to be posted in the comments, and that'll give you the ability to sign up to one of the options that we've been through tonight. Emma.
Thanks, Liam. So some incredible speakers, and I think Josh's words there summing that up. Josh in prison facing up to a year now without trial, and we're asking for a couple of days sitting in Parliament, you know, compared to, you know, what other people have done. And I think we all need time to talk about this, don't we? This is big, this is huge, and we can't handle it alone. But remember that you're not on your own. Look at how many people are on this call. So many people now are stepping up, and now is the time. We're all in this together. So now is the opportunity to get into groups and talk about this. You've heard our voices. Now let's hear yours. We are running a few minutes over, but do stay with us. We don't have much time in this emergency, but hopefully you all have a few more minutes this evening to really think about what you can do and how you can step up. So I'm just going to run through the things that you can do. Those 4 options again. 1, donate an hour of your salary every month. You can do that. Support. You know, we heard from Kelly, you know, these other organizations and movements that need our time, they need our support. Mobilize. We need to be out there leafleting, door knocking, talking to people, getting everyone together on the 1st of October, all together outside Westminster to demand this. Governments don't change because they want to, they change because they're forced to, and that's what we need to do. And finally, act. Let's come, let's sit peacefully, non-violently, in beautiful solidarity and unity with each other. These are our options tonight, and we're going to go into breakout rooms and talk more about that. If you're watching this on YouTube, there is a Google form now in the comments that you can fill in to register your involvement. So if you haven't made it into the call, you can still stay in the loop, and we will be in touch with you. And we are going to end the live stream now. Thank you to all for being here.